Hi, Chris. How are you? Nice, quiet week in Formula One.
Yeah, chill, just taking it easy, just not really been paying much attention to what's going on. Is anything happening?
Was this something that, I read your article and it was wonderful when I read it, Chris, and I was thinking about it. Is this an indication of the internal struggles in Red Bull, more than just one driver, just the chaos that's going on inside Red Bull right now?
Yeah, I think it's a bit of a hangover from last year. If we look at the real power struggles that we had within Red Bull last year, and between Christian Horner, with Helmut Marko, with who was going to have control of the team, it stems back to when Dietrich Mateschitz died, and there was kind of a chance for a new order there, and different people were trying to grab a bit more power for themselves. And I feel like off the back of that, we've got this situation now where there's no clear autonomy within Red Bull. There's a few too many voices involved at the same time, and it's meant that there's sometimes decisions made by committee. There's other times where it's almost like, well, go on then, you go, you have your choice now, and if it's wrong, then we go with mine. And you've got people at the top in, largely between Christian and Helmut, but others are going to be involved as well, who are almost willing certain things to fail to prove them right. And I just don't think it's a very collaborative situation at the moment. So when it's come to driver choices, that's been a very emotive subject. And I think there was a point where maybe they'd have wanted Daniel Ricciardo last year to have performed and gone into that seat. It didn't happen. Then it was Sergio Perez who was committed to for the long term. That didn't happen either. It didn't work out well. But I think there was just some short-termism with some of the decision making and not really a considered look at the wider picture, and that led them to this mess at the start of this season.
I was thinking about this too, Chris, that one of the things, Red Bull, the Red Bull Academy, it was always the feeder system you aspired to. You would see them like if you were a Red Bull driver, you were going to work your way up. Yuki had done everything he needed to do. He continually kept beating everybody they put in his way at RB. He did everything that was necessary. Why wasn't he the driver at the end of the year? Whose decision was that, or is that part of that collaborative effort you're talking about?
Yeah, I mean, it's a great question, Jim, because that was something I wrote, and I did the whole smug thing of reposting an article I'd written from last December when it was clear that Sergio Perez was going to be replaced, and it was clear that Liam Lawson was going to get the nod. And I was saying, it's got to be Yuki. Like, everything points to Yuki here. He's done his time. He'd had 4 seasons in F1 at that point. He had at least matched, if not outperformed, every teammate he'd had, which admittedly had been mixed. Let's be honest. Liam had shown good signs. Liam had shown potential. He'd really taken the fight to Yuki in a short space of time. He'd shown he had something there. But Yuki was the one that you could afford for it to go wrong with because he had nothing left to prove. His next natural step was to go up into the Red Bull seat. And if that didn't happen, then why are you keeping him on? Whereas with Liam, he still had so much learning to do, so much experience he needed to gain. He'd only done 11 races. And I think a lot of it stems from Honda having pulled out of Formula One during COVID, saying they were going to leave and no longer be an engine supplier. Then a change in management there, the change in regulations for 2026 attracted Honda back in. By that point, Red Bull had set up its own power unit company because it couldn't get a competitive supply deal. So it was spending huge money, hundreds of millions of dollars, to become an engine supplier itself. And then Honda comes back as a works partner to Aston Martin, which will start next year. And I think that just really hurt Red Bull, really annoyed them, really caused them a lot of difficulty that they didn't really need. So they weren't that keen on helping out a Honda driver or a Honda backs driver in Sonoda. But eventually, I feel like Yuki has proven that they can't ignore him any longer. And that's why he's now getting his chance.
When Ted Kravitz was so direct with Christian, is that one of those? I wouldn't say a fait accompli, it's the wrong term I'm using, but he obviously had heard the same rumblings. Ted knew where he was going with that question, didn't he? I would
Yeah,
assume.
I was kind of frustrated over the weekend because I wasn't in China. There's one of 3 races I wasn't traveling to this year. And you kind of hope when it's that early that you won't get something this dramatic so early in the season. And I spoke to Luke Smith, a good friend of mine who works for The Athletic, and he was there for the weekend. And he said as early as Thursday, someone had made a throwaway comment about Liam maybe being replaced by Yuki as soon as Suzuka. And he said, you don't take it seriously at that point. That does seem like a ridiculous suggestion and just a bit of rumour mill spinning. But then by Saturday, he said, with the way the sprint had gone and Lawson was still struggling, it meant that having heard that already, people then asked the odd question or discussed it slightly. And by Sunday morning, it was actually looking like, yeah, this could well happen. And Sunday also being a poor day for Liam, then just cemented that. So it very quickly moved within the paddock. So someone somewhere had already said this is a real possibility, and it started to leak out over that weekend. And yeah, it was something that I imagine did reach Ted as well. And that's why he would have put that to Christian.
Would Liam Lawson have been better off for his career, just leaving the whole Red Bull, saying, no, I'm done. Let me out of this and figure out what I'm doing, because I just wonder what his track is now. This is a black mark on his career that as long as he's in Red Bull, how does he ever work his way out of it?
I think the opposite is true in this sense. You've got to look at the best example he has is Pierre Gasly. So Gasly had 12 races in the Red Bull car. He'd been promoted fairly quickly from what was at the time Toro Rosso into Red Bull, 12 races, and then he was dropped in place of Alex Albon. Well, that move could have ended Gasly's career, but he responded very well, performed very well in the junior team. And although it was a black mark enough that it meant he wasn't going back up to Red Bull, it did mean other teams were impressed with him and then picked him up afterwards, and he's now at Alpine. So that could happen for Liam, but also it's happened so early that I think he could perform strongly for the rest of this year, even just the coming races. And very quickly, everyone will go, well, that was a blip. That was the environment at Red Bull. That wasn't Liam. And Red Bull need to get better at being able to give a car that both drivers can handle, and someone like Liam, who's got clear talent and potential, can perform well in. So I think it's actually come early enough that allows him to recover. It will be a huge blow because it's a very quick, very clear, you're not good enough right now, you're not performing. That will be tough for him, but at the same time, he's going into an environment he knows and likes, and I think in that sense, it's the best place for him to be able to try and rebuild his confidence. Whether he does or not, we'll see, but I think if he went anywhere else, it's with maybe a lot of people wondering, has he got it, has he not, is he good enough, is he not? The Racing Bulls team know he is.
Is disappointed with the new ownership and with the changes, obviously, with the family after the passing of the head of Red Bull? Is it out of the realm of possibility that Christian Horner won't be with this program at the end of the year, or Helmut?
To be honest, sitting here now, I do wonder if one of them might not be. The tricky bit is you could have said that 12 months ago. I probably am surprised sat here now after the way last year panned out that both of them are still there. And I do think it would take some pretty strong leadership to go, we're changing things here. But if you look at the slide from the middle of last season, competitive-wise, to where they're at now, the risk of Max Verstappen leaving because the car isn't good enough and the team isn't performing well enough, I think changes could well need making. Now, I would still say the success Red Bull have had, you still back Horner and Marco somehow to work it out and to get the team back on track. You give them that opportunity first. But I think by the end of this season, if it goes the way it's looking like, if Tsunoda doesn't perform very well in that car either because the car's not competitive and the environment's not good, if Max doesn't manage to fight or retain his championship, if Red Bull are third or fourth in the Constructors' Championship, that slide is far too big and is far too big a turnaround, and someone would need to either leave or have their role completely changed so there's a clear autonomy and hierarchy. And I think the two of them would not be willing to become secondary to the other. So one would have to go.
Do you think Max at some point, try and get inside of the head of Max Verstappen, is going to make you crazy anyway, but does he, maybe like with the one post that he put a like on and everybody went nuts because it was talking about that. Is he getting tired of being perceived as the bad guy because the car's set up for him?
Absolutely, because it's not set up for him. It's the
right, but everyone tells you that. They're like, oh,
Yeah.
it's front end, and you can't drive this car. It's like driving on ice when you're blind, smoking a joint. You can't drive this car.
Yeah,
Right?
it's there's a great podcast called the High Performance Podcast with it's Jake Humphrey, who used to host BBC's Formula One coverage, and he works with someone, talks to a lot of high achievers in all sorts of sport and other businesses. But he had Alex Albon on at one stage and asked him that very question, and Albon explained it. He's like, it's not being built for Max at all. The engineers are designing a car to go as quick as possible, and they take that to the extremes. It's why Red Bull have been so good, and they've created cars that can be so quick, that they make it so extremely peaky and challenging to drive. But if you can get it right, it's really quick. And Max can. He said he likened it to if you turn the mouse sensitivity on your laptop or computer up. Yeah.
It's a great analogy. I'm sorry, I'm about to explain this for everybody. It's the best analogy I've heard of that Red Bull car.
Yeah, absolutely. So it's like, if you have a normal mouse sensitivity, we're used to moving your mouse around and you're in full control of it. If you turn it up to hypersensitive, the most sensitive it can go, and it's dashing about all over the screen and you feel like you're not in control. He said it's kind of like that. So you want to turn that sensitivity down, but that makes you go slower. Well, Max can handle that high sensitivity. So as Red Bull develop the car and improve it, it gets more sensitive. Max can handle it. And they're not doing it for Max. They're doing it because that's the way it will go the quickest if you can handle it. The thing is, only Max Verstappen can handle it. So that's one of the reasons why. And then the other drivers, because it's so sensitive, they make mistakes. So they come back a little bit from the limit. And then the car's not in its performing operating window. The tyres aren't in the right working space. And it's a snowball in the wrong direction. And that creates this huge gap in performance. So that's why you sometimes saw, like last year, Sergio Perez being very close. And as the car got developed and got harder to drive, the gap got far bigger, because with each step that made it harder to drive that Max could handle, and Max went quicker with it, Sergio couldn't, and he went slower with it, and it kept extrapolating. So I think Max is kind of saying, you're underestimating the job I'm doing. Like, I'm doing a brilliant job with a very hard car. He doesn't want the car to be hard. He wants it to be quick. He's more than happy for his teammate to be quick in it too. He just wants it to be quick. So as it gets quicker and he handles it in a really impressive way, people turn around and then say it's built for him, like it's making his life easier. It's making his life much harder. He's just able to deal with it.
What he's doing on his own at the front of the field, the fact that he's like what second in points right now, that he hangs in there with these guys in these races in a car that is the fourth, but you said in your article, Chris, it's the fourth best car on the grid right now. It tells you what a great driver is. But I was thinking about the second driver too. So much of F1 is about sim time. Sim time. You doing this. Didn't they know these drivers would have these twitches and these issues? Is maybe the sims are they a little overrated then when it comes to this car?
I think it's very difficult with a sim in the sense that you don't have the fear factor. You know, you might have the characteristics, but it is still a game, and you work out, how do I drive this car in that manner? And you can go much closer to the limit without scaring yourself. Because if you go beyond it, it doesn't hurt. It's not that damaging. You know, you didn't actually write off a racing car. Whereas in real life, you go and do that on a Friday practice session and you have a big crash, you've ruined your whole weekend. And you've cost the team millions of dollars. So you can basically drive closer to your own potential. The limit to your potential isn't that, you know, for Liam Lawson, for example, it's not that he can't drive the car as quickly as Max, as in potentially. It's just that there's other things, like there's your whole central nervous system telling you shouldn't do this, because if it goes wrong, it goes really wrong. Not having the confidence. Helmut Marko's talked about it today, I think, about the confidence that Liam came in with and lost very quickly is stopping him then reaching his potential. So yeah, I think a simulator is just very hard. A driving god on racing games and simulators and things, and I get in a real car and it's, you know, you're 20 seconds a lap slower because you realize actually what it's like, and your body just can't compute it. Don't forget, these drivers don't get a lot of time in the real car. Liam got a day and a half before going to Melbourne. Then you're on a semi-street circuit. We had rain in the race, but it was a hectic one. Then he went to China. Both of these are tracks he'd never driven on, and it was a sprint weekend, so he got one practice session to try and find his confidence again. And the team obviously have a run plan they need to go through to understand setup and tyre wear and things like that. So it's almost impossible. They can run and run and run in a simulator all day long, and that's why they get quick in the sim. But by the time it comes to the real car, they get so little time in it. It's very hard to then translate that into reality.
Red Bull's such a soap opera right now. It's such a soap opera. I'm sure you have to go through like, okay, I have 20 other stories I could write about this right now. You could do nothing but write about Red Bull this year.
It's a book in itself. I was talking to a rival team member actually about it in the last week or so, and just discussing certain aspects and some of the politics behind there and why certain issues have come up and theories why others have. You know, it's not always clear, but they're chapters of a book if you can find out the real detail, and someone within that team hopefully will explain all at some stage. We find out bits and bobs, and you obviously hear it from different sides as well. Internally there are different factions to that team, but at the end of the day, what's, I guess, so fascinating about it and why it's a soap opera that people are really invested in is because the team is so good and has been so good and has created such brilliant cars and had huge success, and has arguably the best driver in the world behind one of the wheels and doing a brilliant job of it. And as you say, that, you know, the fact that Max is in the fight, if he wins in Suzuka, which I do not think is a ridiculous idea. He loves that track. He can be very quick over one lap. If he could sneak a pole position, which sounds crazy to say Max Verstappen sneak a pole position, but he was there or thereabouts in the mix at times in the first two races. If he gets it right, gets it on pole, then he will be very hard to get ahead of and beat, even with a car that's not that competitive. And that would put him in the lead of the championship after three races. He's going to be a factor all season, even in a car that's not that good. And again, that's another reason why people are so interested, because you're watching kind of the mighty fall, but at the same time, the mighty still do special things.
Yeah, and you know, I have a close bond with Suzuka because I've driven it multiple times on my F1 game on my PS5. So, Chris, I mean, I understand 220R better than most of the drivers in the grid right now because I've driven it sitting on my ass in my basement. But couple quick things before I let you go, and thank you for the time. I know how incredibly busy you are. First of all, is the plank underneath the car the best way to measure whether or not these cars are within limits? It just feels like a piece of wood in the most technologically advanced racing series ever that's literally named after a rule book. And that's how we're going to figure out if these cars are breaking specs, is a plank underneath them.
Yeah, it still is. I mean, partly because it's a very complex and sophisticated piece of wood, and it does have little skid blocks on it and things as well. So that's why you get the sparks. They've got the titanium skids there that help give sparks. To stop it being easy to wear away, it's got to be consistent. It can't be just like one curb strike that would do it. Multiple would, but it's got to be about how the car is consistently running over a race distance. So that is actually pretty well thought out. And the thing is, on that topic, understandably, with Lewis getting his disqualification by 0.5 millimeter too much wear, but you do have to draw the line somewhere. And generally, what the teams do is they're not pushing it anywhere near that limit. That it might get a little bit of wear, but they're aware that if it's bottoming out too much, to stay off certain curbs or increase tire pressures just to raise the rise height slightly, whatever they may need to do. But they will say to the driver what they have to do to help counteract that. And you don't tend to get them that close. So to go underneath is when it shows that they made basically a setup error. It's a limit that's there for teams not to cross, essentially. And it is rare that we get it. We had it with both Lewis and Charles in Austin a few years ago, but prior to that, it had been a long time. So, it's a mistake that shouldn't really happen, that one.
I did enjoy watching Max driving the gravel, pick up some extra weight at the end of the race.
Smart, wasn't it?
That's
Smart
one of those moves you go, not bad. That's pretty smart.
Yeah, just being clever. To be fair, I think they're actually allowed also to clean stuff off the tyres if they need to, but they do a lot of pickup. But if they felt it was anything untoward, the FIA could just scrape stuff off. I just think that was him being a little bit careful, a little bit clever, maybe. Also, maybe testing the theory. But all of the teams will have known that by running that long one stop and having such a long second stint, that they'll have taken a lot of rubber off the tyre, and then that could well put them underweight, which is strange that we haven't had that more often in the past. We obviously had it with George Russell in Spa last year, cost him a win. And that was the first time really you'd heard of it. So to have it so soon afterwards is a little bit strange, actually, but it shows how much teams are pushing that weight limit.
Last thing, what's going on with Aston Martin? Are they just on to next year and waiting for Adrian Newey? Because that car is a dog. I mean, Lance Stroll actually extracted a lot from it, more than I expected, but they should be better. Am I wrong?
I think we were maybe expecting this one from them this year. You're right. Full focus on 2026 from a very early stage. They also said what they'd done is actually kind of leave the car a little bit undeveloped, or maybe unsophisticated development on it for this year, because Newey would come in, and if there was anything obvious or big he wanted to do, just looking at it, they could maybe quickly
Blank
add
canvas kind of idea? More of a blank canvas for him to work on?
Yes, slightly,
Okay.
yeah, rather than having to undo something very complex. But at the same time, it was full focus on 26. That's Aston's big opportunity. Even if they'd have nailed it with their car this year and done a brilliant job by throwing resource at it last year, it might put you in the mix with 4 other teams at the front. Exciting for us, yes, but no guarantees you're winning anything.
Yeah.
They could still end up 5th in the championship just with a lot more points. And that doesn't get them any more money, and it would have cost them longer term. So with Newey's arrival, he started at the start of this month. They were focusing fully on 26 as early as they could. And I still think they're there in the mix. Like you say, Lance Stroll's done a really good job in that car, actually.
He has.
Fernando Alonso's had a couple of difficult weekends, but it wasn't his fault that the brakes caught fire in China. But yeah, Lance has been there and picked up the results and doing what he does when he's at his best, in the sense of very understated. Just suddenly he's in the top 6 in Melbourne, and no one's really excited by it. No one really notices it, but you're like, oh yeah, he picked up some good solid points there. So yeah, he's had a good start to the year.
Always people go like, why is Lance Stroll so low key? I'm like, have you met his dad? I'm sure he said 10 words his entire childhood growing up. His dad owns every room he walks into. That's the nature of the beast.
Yeah, very true. He's under a lot of pressure there in that sense. I think he's learned to just ignore what people think, but it means he doesn't put any effort into people thinking highly of him anyway. But that means he maybe doesn't get the respect he deserves when he has a good result.
Point. Chris, always appreciate the time. It's never dull. Can't wait to see what happens at Suzuka, and Red Bull is just a story that continues to give and give and give and give. And I need Lewis to get a win, please. I need so he can break the old F1 video game curse, please.
Well, he's got one in the sprint, but yes, I reckon there'll be one.
Win,
If
Jack.
not
Is it, I mean, I know it's a win, but is it a win? It's a win.
I count it as a win. I just don't count it as the win.
Chris, all the best. We'll talk soon.
Thanks, Jim. Cheers for having me.